Well, thanks for being here, guys. Deanne, Jordan, and Aleysa joining me for a conversation about commercial work for filmmakers, which is something that, at the Women's Film Festival, we're always sort of talking about on the sidelines, but we want to get more women and gender diverse filmmakers into the commercial side of things. And so I think just having this casual conversation with all of us is a step in the right direction. So I think just maybe just I'll quickly, define, I guess, what commercial film work even is, because it's not the 30-second, TV commercial of the past, I guess. Not just that anyway. There's still lots of TV, of course, but a lot of businesses and organizations are producing like online videos and branded content. So I think there's some opportunities there for us to figure out like how we can get more people involved. So I guess like for the purposes of this chat, I guess we're just here to share. I want you guys to feel free to share your experiences and just whoever's going to watch this later, just to learn from that and hopefully better equip, women filmmakers to kind of break into commercial opportunities, which maybe are a little bit out of reach right now. It's great to have the three of you guys here because you all have a different range of experience in the commercial film work. So maybe we can I'll start with Jordan maybe first. And Jordan, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about, your commercial experience and how much of the work that you do is actually commercial. Just give us a little general overview, and maybe then all three of you each one of you can do that.
Yeah, I only kind of have recently started working in commercials like as of last year. But over the years, like when I started working in TV, there were times where like either a commercial, I was like briefly, I joined a commercial company and made like a spec thing for them, and then that sort of fell apart. And there would be times where I would really think about it, be like, I should really get into commercials. Like that's a whole avenue of work that I haven't explored, and then it just wouldn't happen. And then yeah, I guess like a year and a half ago, this producer, Jill, reached out, who's an independent producer who has worked with different agencies. And she was just really cool and very sort of, she just kept at me in a nice way, where she was just like, I don't want to push you, but I really think you'd be good in this, especially with comedy stuff. And so we ended up doing a commercial together, mostly, pretty much entirely because Annie Murphy was in it. And so I had my sort of Schitt's Creek connect with her, and we love to work together. And so that's how I got my first commercial was, I mean, I had to pitch for it and stuff, but Annie wanting me to do it was a big help. And then I've done three other Annie commercials. So I've only done Annie Murphy commercials, and I may only ever get to do Murphy commercials. I don't know, but I have now since joined with a great commercial production company here in Toronto called Steam, and we're trying to break the Annie streak. But yeah, it's been great. They've been really fun, and I do really enjoy the world. It's been demystified a bit, but yeah, I'm still in the kind of early stages of my commercial directing.
Jordan, what was the commercial for that you did with Annie, the first one?
Oh, ever heard of crispy minis? Ever heard of
No.
rice cakes, guys? Yeah, it was for Crispy Minis. She was the sort of brand ambassador of Crispy Minis, and then the other we've done two Crispy Minis and two sparkling ice. So you got a rice cake and a sparkling flavored sparkling water. So they go great together. Yeah.
Awesome. Were those like TV commercials or were they shorter format for
There
online?
was the first, actually, the first one we did was like, I may never get something as good as this again because it was a French and English. So there was a 60, a 30, and like two 15s, two independent 15-second ones. And then I think there was a cut down as well. And then there was a whole French version of that. And then there were four or five like 6-second socials, straight social ones. Um, what did they call those? What's the term they use, Alicia? Not socials. They call
Pre-roll?
Pre-roll socials? I don't
no,
know.
they were using this term. I remember when I first started, I was like, I don't know what any of these words mean. I felt really dumb.
I just
But
call them sixes. I don't know what they do with them, but
so those had a lot of stuff because there was like on location work, and then there were all these sort of studio sixes. And oh, meta. They were calling them meta videos, I guess, just because they were going to go on Facebook. Um, and then the rest of them have been 30s. Sometimes it's two 30s, but I haven't done another 60-second one because it seems like that's less and less people are trying to do 60s now.
Totally. Cool. What about you, Deanne?
Yeah, I've only directed three commercials, and I guess the first one I did was probably 4 years ago. And most of my work over the last 4 years have has has been in television. But it was basically Lynn Andrews had reached out to me. She's a local production manager, and a company out of Toronto, I think it was Flair, was doing the Paralympics commercial. And so it was a really unusual commercial because there were like seven directors. And so there was a main Toronto director, but then I was basically filming Katrina Roxon, who was based in Stephenville on the west coast of Newfoundland. So I basically, filmed a portion of the commercial. So it was kind of interesting because I kind of had to fit, like, I had all the rules. There was the main director. There was a live feed from Toronto while I was directing, and it was just a 1 day shoot, and we kind of had to get everything, and it was cool. Again, it wasn't something that I was looking for. And so it was because it was Lynn and I liked the people who were doing it. Like, Duncan was shooting it. It was people I was very comfortable with. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll just try this. And then very shortly after, I did another commercial for Target. Oh yeah, so the first commercial was like "We're Here." It was for the Canadian team, and then the next commercial I did was called "We Are." So it was really a lot of "we's" happening in that. So it was a "We Are" tourism commercial. It wasn't tourism, hospitality, Newfoundland, Labrador, and it was with Target, and it was interesting because they basically wanted to bring a face of the hospitality industry in Newfoundland, Labrador. So there were people, basically real people, all across Newfoundland, Labrador that they brought in, and we did a couple of day shoots with them. And yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it wasn't actors, so it was like real people and making them feel comfortable. So that was those were two commercials, and the latest commercial I worked with this amazing agency called M5, and this woman, Vicki, reached out to me, and she was really great, and yeah, and so we did that commercial together for um, you know,
The thing,
you know,
CAA Atlantic.
thank you,
Roadside assistance, everybody.
yeah.
Awesome. And I guess let's hear from Aleysa now, who I guess we're calling our heavyweight of making commercials, since
I
she
mean,
has
this is
the
literally the
most experience.
first time I've been in that position at all. I certainly don't consider myself that. I mean, my path was a little bit different in that I started in commercials. So I I was working in casting. The shorter version of the long story was I started in casting, and then one of the production companies that I was casting for was starting a leg of like new directors that they wanted to build from scratch. And so that's kind of how I think that was even the first time I directed. I never even thought about directing at that point. So I did commercials for about, I guess I like 7 or 8 years, or maybe five, between 5 to 10. I don't know. I don't know what time is. And then from that, I got Baroness, and I think it was like that transition from like commercials to sketch kind of made sense. And then from that, I started doing more TV work. And now I do primarily TV work, and then I always say like in the off season, which is usually the winter time, I'll try to do commercials. I mean, I always like it's I always think you have to say try to do, because it's not like you do commercials. It's not if it were up to me, I would do commercials in the off season all the time, but it's not usually. I have to wait for my production company to send me scripts, and then you pitch them. And yeah, so I probably do like, I don't know, 4 or 5 commercials a year, like not a ton. I certainly know like full-time commercial directors who, they're working all year round, multiple days, shoots all around the world. So they're the heavyweights. I'll just feel like a big guy in this four square Zoom. But yeah.
Sounds good. Well, maybe we could segue to, because you just said about how it's funny you started in commercials, and then that sort of lent itself to like Baroness, which is like a sketch show, which is like the short form. So yeah, like maybe we can all talk about a little bit how like the difference between making film, which has length, and usually I guess commercial work, which is short pieces, right? Like the challenges of that or the joy of it, maybe.
I mean, I always tell the story about the first commercial I did after shooting Baroness. So Baroness was obviously low budget. We were shooting on location. We had a lot to do. It was like a real shift for me to go from commercials to TV because you just didn't, you didn't have as much time. Again, you can take a day to 5 days to shoot one 30-second commercial somehow versus, 1 day to shoot 6 sketches all around town. So the pacing's different for sure. But yeah, the first commercial I shot after Baroness, I was wrapped by lunch because I was so used to that pace. And there was this moment where I was like, should we keep going so that it seems like we're spending the money properly? Or is this like in good form to wrap before lunch? But it was also like, there's nothing else we can get. Like we got everything and then some. So I think the pacing's a lot different. There's just as much kind of politics. If it's not a showrunner, it's a client or an agency. It's both collaborative and you're being told what to do. I think the more you do, the more trust you have, and the more trust you get, so it becomes easier. I've been very lucky to get on a roster for Walmart, and so I don't have to pitch them. I just like single bid, and it's great. And they really trust me, and it makes it like fun. So yeah, I think for me, I had to kind of get out of commercials to appreciate doing commercials more.
Hmm. Yeah, and not to imply, I guess, that the commercial work is always done by lunch because I don't think that's true.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, you're like, how could we be overtime? We just shot 115 French and English today. How is this possible? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, Jordan, Deanne, if like, do you have a different experience when it comes to making commercials, like with long days? Because you have one day and you got a probably very ambitious. I know with our experience together, Deanne, it was definitely that way with a couple 12-hour days. Apologies.
No, I mean, honestly, I found it was really fun because, we everyone knew what we were doing, and I didn't find it like difficult or that we were on. I mean, at one point we were losing the light, and then that point, that's sort of like you're fighting that, but that's just, I think that's just production, that yeah, I mean, I really like that the fact that you're kind of committed for such a short period of time. I started out really, and I still do, making feature films, and being a Canadian feature film director is hard, and like you work on projects for many years, and sometimes they go and sometimes they don't, and it's really great to get a gig where you're just like, okay, I'm doing this for like, we're prepping for a couple of weeks and it's a couple of days and then it's done. I actually really enjoy that. And I mean, I think of starting out, I feel like I'm like the example of like, hey, maybe you should have looked for commercial work starting out earlier because of that. And, living in Newfoundland, I think you kind of have to cast a wide net for opportunities. And I think when I started, I was just like, okay, how can I get close to a camera? And whether you're doing a commercial or you're doing a TV show or a feature, right? They're all different. I think for me, I worked a lot in documentary because that's what was accessible to me. And I think it's great that we're doing this panel. And Vicki, you're saying, we're a Newfoundland agency, and we're looking for new talent to come work with us. And so, maybe that will open doors for, young talent here.
Yeah. Like Jordan, I know it's very different because I know me and Deanne are here. You guys are in Toronto. I don't know, I guess, Jordan, do you find like before you got into the commercial side of things, like did you feel there were barriers there or did it feel not accessible to you?
Well, I mean, I think something that I'm like learning about the commercial world is like you do get kind of put in a bucket or a box or something. So, you know, with TV, I mean, it happens a little bit where you're known for doing comedy or whatever. And so if you want to do like a real serious thing, maybe there's a bit of a barrier there for the person to kind of imagine you being able to do it, but it's a little more fluid. I think with commercials, I've had a hard time sort of breaking into it earlier on before I was I guess before I had enough work, before I had Baroness, which was, shorter form sketch stuff. So, as close to commercial as I could get. I think there was this feeling that like the commercial world and the film and TV world were very separate, and like commercial agencies or clients wouldn't be like, yeah, okay, sure, they can do 6 episodes of a TV show, but I don't see a 30-second spot on their reel, and therefore I don't really know if they can do this. And that I found a little hard to navigate because I was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else I can shoot 11 pages in a day. I'm sure I can shoot a 30-second commercial. But there was this sort of feeling of like, well, maybe I can't. Maybe there is some sort of like magical thing I don't understand about this world. And so I felt a little intimidated by it, or, just like when you don't know lingo or you don't know the process, like the pitching process, making a treatment and pitching it. And that stuff felt very like, I don't know. It ticked that, it turned on that thing in me where I was just like, I don't know how to do it. I'm scared of this. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't know what I'm doing. But then, of course, once you do it a couple of times, you are reminded, no, it is just all the same stuff. You have to be able to like, have to be able to do a little bit more sort of like song and dance stuff with clients and agency. And you have to, I think, let go of I mean, it's weird. I find commercials like you get to have a lot of creative say in more so than in TV sometimes because you hire the DP you want, a production designer, you have a lot more sort of early on choice in who the team is and what it looks like and all sorts of things like that. But you, as Aleysa said, you are just sort of like someone tells you exactly what they want and you sort of take it and then you repeat it back to them and you're like, this is what you want. And they're like, yes, that is what I want. But somehow you've put your own flavor on it or whatever. It's an interesting process of sort of like, yeah, when you're pitching on something, they literally have like, sometimes they have storyboards and they're like, okay, well, I guess this is what you want. Okay, I can do this, no problem. But I don't know. I think what I like about them too, not just the short sort of you're done in a couple days. I like how you get to set and everyone there's been, even though if it's been annoying to get there, everyone has agreed on exactly what you're going to shoot. You've run these storyboards up the flagpole 6 different times. You've tweaked things, sometimes to a point where you're like, okay, yeah, I'll make the person in the storyboard smile less. Okay, the actor's gonna not smile as much. Okay, but then you get to set and you're just executing a plan. Everyone is on the same page. Sometimes, maybe things will go awry, but there's something very nice about that where you're like, we're just shooting these 3 shots. I know exactly what they are. Everyone agreed to this and we're doing it. There's none of the like, here's what I'm thinking. Here's my shot list. You've already decided that long before you get to set. And I don't know, that's kind of fun. That's just like, then you're just executing your vision, which is nice.
It does feel like the commercial world, like again, coming from commercials into TV or long format was like commercials, there's protocols in place. There's like a history of systems. You do your casting, you have your pre-pro meeting, you have like there's a hierarchy of like agency client, like it's all very clear and defined. And yeah, there's no questions by the time you get to the shoot day. Whereas like TV felt like the Wild West to me. Like
Yeah.
there was in every show that I've done thus far, it feels like we're just making up the rules because nothing like this has been shot before. So while there is decisions being made from experience, it's also in flux at all times.
Totally. Alicia, have you ever been given like, a concept, I guess, from an agency or a production house and like it was really basic and then you sort of did your thing to it and I don't know, poured yourself into it and made it like a completely different thing? You still have to run it up the flagpole and all that stuff, but do you have an example of where you sort of took something basic and made it yours?
I mean, definitely when I first started, because of they had to kind of build a reel, you were, how they did it is they kind of go to agencies and try to get like spec scripts or things like that and, you know, see if we could shoot that. And I think because our company was investing in that script, we had a lot more freedom to play around. So, literally one of the assignments was like for Mac milk or something. It was a convenience store chain, and it was like just make something crazy. Like that was the that was the thing. And I can't even remember what the tagline was, but it just kind of like was a wide open. I mean, that's again, that's I think an exception to the rule and would never happen again, but that's probably the freest I've ever been, where it was kind of like shooting a music video where you're just like, here's the sentence. Now do something with that. I feel
Mhm.
like every commercial kind of and it always depends on the client, depends on the agency, has varying degrees of trust in the director to take it beyond boy goes to store and buys milk. Like, is that boy a set of twins? Is the milk like is the convenience store, a European bakery? I think like depends on sometimes you get a sense like in the briefing call, which is the call you do before you write the treatment, that they're looking to you to bring ideas. They were like, when you're given the free I find probably the most common is like because I come from comedy and I do a lot of improv, they're like, never mind the dialogue. They know that they've got the cell line that they need to get in there and they've got the tag at the end. But if there's something that I can think of that's going to make it funnier or, bigger, or like if sometimes there's like an established look or something that's already like Canadian Tire commercials or TD Bank or whatever it is, they've got a look. And you're kind of trying to be like, okay, are we staying in that world or do we have more freedom to kind of play around? So, um, examples, I can't
Like,
remember
Aleysa,
a lot of them, but yeah, I feel like you get some freedom to take it past the page.
what was the script like, that great the mattress commercial you did last year, which was like the
Oh yeah.
musical? What was the script like for that? Was it all laid out, or that felt like it had a lot?
Yeah, that one, I mean, that's great. Leave it to Jordan to know my entire body of work. So that was also a rare thing because I had a friend who was we met here. I think also advertising is all relationships to a certain extent. But she was an Australian and she went back to Australia and for whatever reason called me in to do this mattress commercial. And that was a song. That was just like lyrics to a song, and they knew it was going to be a musical number. They had a few references of kind of the style. They knew it was like lower budget, so they knew it was going to be kind of more of like a stage set with that's very pared down. And yeah, and then it was up to me to kind of like work with the choreographer, figure out how to shoot it, figure out the length, and yeah, exactly. That's like you're kind of given the skeleton of it, and then you have to flesh it out.
Gotcha. Yeah, what would Deanne, you mentioned earlier, like having the one job that was like the Paralympics, I think. That was like a national thing that, they've reached out to you for the local bit. And then the other thing was working with Target, which is a local ad agency, of course. Like, is there any difference in, I guess, dealing with other people's creative vision, I guess, like on the ground versus, getting it kind of handed down from away? Like, is there any, I don't know, just anything to talk about, I guess, in terms of like dealing with agency people, I suppose. And you're not allowed to talk about me.
A little strange, like obviously with Target and working with you, Vicky, with M5, like having people on the ground was a lot easier versus, some feed where you're getting like, talking to a screen. It's a little bit easier just to have people with you on the ground. I mean, they were all like good experiences. I don't feel like one was I didn't have, they were all good, really. I mean, I would say the one, having a feed that was a little difficult because sometimes I feel like you're shooting things that I'm not necessarily, they want things that are a little different. And so it was just the communication because just not having people on the ground, I think was a little bit more of
Hmm.
a little bit more challenging than just having having the agencies here or the clients or whatever. So I don't know if that's really a helpful kind of answer, but
It's all good. Yeah, I mean,
mhm.
I just kind of I think anybody watching this later is going to be like, well, how did you get these opportunities? So like you guys have already shared that, but like so Jordan, like you were sort of like dancing around it a bit, but did you say somebody like particular like sort of reached out to you and it was like that one relationship that really did it for you?
Yeah, so Jill, Jill used to be, she was with a different agency when she first reached out to me, Ad Hoc, I think it was called. And this was years ago. And she's just, yeah, kept kind of would check in every few months and been like, oh, I got, a script came across my desk. I thought of you. What do you, are you busy? Do you want to read it? And I kind of, I just didn't have a lot of time. I was doing a lot of TV, and then she just caught me at a good time, I guess, where I had a window, and obviously where the Annie thing, it all kind of came together that
Yeah.
way. But yeah, like years ago, years and years ago. I mean, I will say, especially, I should say, the first commercials I ever did were actually in Newfoundland were for Anthony Insurance, and but that similarly, someone reached out directly to me. I think again because of comedy. I think it's like, that is a niche that is helpful, if you do comedy and it's a comedy spot. Um, but then yeah, this other company, I mean, I don't know. I think having done Baroness and Shits, like having short bites of comedy was sort of how I got into this. Like,
So you're sort of like you're a little bit established, like people just kind of know you. You're not
yeah.
coming out of the blue, like trying to get a gig, as an unknown. Like I think
No,
that's
I mean, I tried that years ago. Like I joined, there was a company briefly that existed called Brink. And it was like this British guy and another guy. Again, like I feel like sometimes production companies sort of like arrive and then disappear. But they reached out because of a short of mine that they liked. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll sign with you. And I made two little things with them. One was like a kind of cool animated, like a stop motion sort of promo thing. And one was like a weird Christmas thing, very low, like no people in them. There was
mm,
no actors in them. And then they kind of just disappeared. So I don't know. I don't think those are not useful pieces of work. I'm not like, here's my weird Christmas spec. Get me a job. It was more so like, yeah, having had some luck in TV and yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think all of you, the three of you, yeah, Alicia's just said it now, like it's such a relationship business. And I think because you guys have this work and people know you and you have these relationships where people know like you deliver and you know what you're doing. Yeah, it's a different ball game, I guess, when people are just trying to break into all of it. Um,
Yeah, I mean that said, like there's, even so when I first started, there were definitely, they sell this like commercials are the best and you're gonna make so much money, you're gonna make all this money by the end of the year, and then that never happens. And also it's a saturated market, really, to a certain extent. Like there's so many production companies, there's so many directors, so even once you're in, then and you like at least when I started, I had no relationships. Like outside of I mean, they were smart because the relationships that I had built doing spec spots, those end up being great kind of relationships that carry through, including that job in Australia. And but that said, there was also a whole world that I couldn't break through in. And I think we were talking about this earlier, but like I didn't even know that I was like set for comedy yet. Like when I first started, I got thrown in a lot. Like I was a woman, so I do kids and I do, tampon commercials. And I'd be happy to do those things, it's great, but I was like, this isn't necessarily my voice, or like, I'm not sure what I can bring to this. They were great exercises in working in visual medium, but it slowly became obvious that I, did more comedy stuff. But yeah, I think everything's relationships, even getting into the industry and then staying in the industry too, because you're still going to have to prove yourself to the creatives who've never heard of you.
That's right. And I guess too, the relationship aspect of things can be a bit of a barrier because a lot of agencies have their relationships that, established, not necessarily with women, right? And so, yeah, you're trying to kind of get in there, ahead of the established relationships, you know what I mean? Which,
And like Jordan was saying too, you get put in a box, and some agencies, not yourself, obviously, because you know what to look for, but like they don't necessarily know how to look at a reel. So they're looking to see if they have a Coke spot, they want to see a Coke spot. If they have a food spot, they want to see food. So, and when they see a feature film or they see short films, they don't know what a director does necessarily. Like they don't know how it translates unless there's a very specific scene or visual that they connect to. But then you have production companies like Jillian or who, who they're looking for directors. They have like they have a void that needs filling. They need a comedy director. They need a woman, whatever it is. And that's when you get like production companies who are going to film festivals who are like, or heard about a short or a music video that kind of peaked. And again, I think that world is, or those opportunities are kind of shrinking because the money's not, the money's tighter and there's not a lot of production companies taking as many chances on directors or building reels and things like that. So that's where I think having the reel or having the work like that can kind of show that you can work in kind of telling a story in 30 seconds is really valuable.
Do you guys think too, like in this, I don't know, today's world, I guess there's so much video content and I don't know, maybe there is opportunities for, lower stakes, projects that people can get into, with not a lot of experience?
I think so. I mean, I think like if this is something you want to pursue, then making some intentional choices of like creating some work that fits a 15-second. I really look like I'm
like anything that you say
here.
right now is going to feel like you have godlight on you. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
Jordan, speak the gospel, tell us what we need to know.
I know we're all just like looking at Jordan right now.
I don't know what to do. But yeah, like I don't know. I have a lot of buds here in Toronto, like in the comedy community who are performers and make a lot of online stuff, sketches, little short. I mean, if no one out there is following Rodrigo Fernandez Stoll, go follow him now because he's a dear friend of mine. He's a hilarious man and he's doing a bit or making a video, shooting something every day. And some of them are little things, some of them are big, and that has led not only to him having like, a kind of like great body of work to draw from, but also now like actual brands are reaching out to him to be like, can you make a weird video for my t-shirt company and stuff? And so he's starting to actually generate work that way because somebody can look at his Instagram and go, oh, that's kind of something I would want. So I do think, we talked about this last week when we were kind of strategizing this thing of like, maybe if you do want to pursue commercial work, instead of like making a short film or a music video, like try to make like a 30-second spec for something like, hey, whether it's for a real company or a real brand or something, or, or truly spec or made up, like telling a story in that short amount of time is a challenge. And I think the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And it'll help with the sort of like imagination leap when an agency is looking for somebody new and be like, oh, they didn't have $1 million to make this, but like it's succinctly told. There's a visual like angle to it and it's clear and to the point and okay, let's have a conversation with this person at least,
And you certainly do hear the stories. I know of a few directors let's say three. I know three directors who made spec spots just cause they threw a tag on the end and then that company reached out, bought the commercial. And then because they had that, then that led to something else and now they're repped and now they're doing work all the time. So
yeah,
it is valuable.
And like Vicki said too, so much stuff is like TikTok short, even shorter is like things that work in 6 seconds on TikTok. You can make a lot of online content, that doesn't have to look like a really super slick commercial. It can be like there's a lot of work like that too. I mean, that we were talking about Vicki of like, next time you guys have something that's like, okay, we have 10 grand to make these 2 videos or something like that's the perfect opportunity for, a filmmaker who's made a bunch of shorts or music videos who's like, I'm ready. I know I can do this. It's not a huge financial risk for you guys. It's also not crazy stakes for them if it doesn't go, amazing, but probably they'll knock it out of the park. And then they've got 2 short pieces for their reel and you've made a new connection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I guess what we're saying is, yeah, you gotta have something to show, right? Whether that is existing little bits of stuff you've done in a reel of some kind, or you gotta make it. Yeah, because I think the reality is too, like the decision makers, like people at agencies or producers, are very busy, and so yeah, to go out and like find it and put something together to try and um make a case for somebody else to hire somebody is just not it's just not easy to do. So, but yeah, do you guys think that I don't know, a lot of women just don't bother with the commercial thing just because they feel like it's male dominated, and so they just figure there's no point?
I mean, not that we're past that at all. I hope that I feel like women are driven to tackle any industry at this point, and there's like, I don't know that it's us who are our barriers. More so, it's the people who aren't looking. It's like it's not that we're tentative about getting into anything. It's that,
Right.
even if we're standing in a corner screaming, "Hey, look at me!" There's some guy over there that they're going to look at instead.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, I feel like women are hungry. I feel like we want to get in there. I feel like we have families to feed and, dresses to buy. So, like, yeah, I mean, even this discussion is a testament to, like, I think we definitely need more women in the industry and more, it definitely needs to be more representation in general. And definitely there was a wave for a short minute, right around just at the tail end of the pandemic, maybe, where there was like an urgency to find new talent, new voices. It feels like that window is closed a little bit. We're moving backwards. Um, but I think that so long as there are I actually find I've worked with a lot of female creative directors. I've worked with a lot of like it's kind of whatever the demographic of the agency is. I've worked with a lot of like diverse creatives who are looking to work with people who could share their vision. So those are relationships that are great. And not to say that you should leverage that, but also like that what makes us different is what makes us better at our jobs or what we can bring to it.
And sometimes
Absolutely.
it is as simple, not sim it's never simple, but like, look, here's Vicky, like anybody who's watching this, like email Vicky and go have a coffee with Vicky and like just start having those conversations, making those 'cause that's how you start a connection is like that's why you do general meetings. As our agent trots us out to do all these general meetings and maybe none of them lead to anything that you can put your finger on, but maybe a year from now something will come across Vicky's desk and she'll go, "Oh my God, that's perfect for this woman I met." So don't just send out an email and be like, "Hey, I want to get into this." Like, be proactive about it. Go have a coffee and just like get in their brains. Like, it's all it is just making a good connection and hoping it'll lead to something eventually.
I mean, I would say there's also like, to start with, and Vicky, maybe you can speak to this, like just the way the infrastructure of a creative agency works, because I wouldn't know who to reach out to if I like to even start with. Like, who do you like? That's a good place to start, I guess. Is like, who are the creative directors? Who are the decision makers?
Yeah, totally. And I think here, in St. John's is probably very different than it is in Toronto. Like it's really small market here. The company I work for is not super small, but it's still small comparatively, right? But yeah, I think the creative directors probably at the agency level anyway are the ones making the decisions in terms of like who to hire. But like the producer is also some jobs are like maybe I'll call them lower stakes. And like we have an agency producer on staff, Kelly Collins. She's a woman too, so that's great. But yeah, sometimes she's just going ahead and hiring things for, smaller projects like B-roll stuff that I may not need to have an opinion on. So yeah, I mean, getting in front of her is also a thing. So yeah. That's all really, really great information, I think. Yeah, because I think it's not just, oh, like all the men are getting the jobs, why bother? I think it's just like you said, the knowledge and not being sure where to begin.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Or even
Yeah,
like
that's
seeing
great.
it as an option. like if you have like a young filmmaker who's really focused on, writing their first feature or doing shorts, just to know that this is a potential avenue for them, that because I don't think it was really presented to me when I first started. I was doing short films.
Mhm.
Working at CBC, I was doing more in the doc world, and that's when the reality TV was sort of bigger. So that's sort of the kind of work that I started doing. I'm very grateful to do that, but it's great to know now for people who are starting out that perhaps this is,
Mhm.
a path that they can check out.
Absolutely. And this is like a lot of this is the work that will, keep your bills paid while you are making that other piece of that other passion the thing that you really want to make is probably the feature film or the TV. Um, but yeah, it's like, I don't know, is anybody able to speak to just like how lucrative it is, I guess, when it comes to doing commercial work versus film and TV? Or is it all about the same?
I would say it's lucrative, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Um, and the more you do, the more you get paid. So, like the again, I'm don't work as much as like other fellow directors, but I think of like the day rate is you're paid or how like old school style in Toronto, at least like how your rate is negotiated is like there's a standard day rate, and so it can range between like 10 and 25 grand a day, but that said, it's attached to 2 to 3 weeks of prep. And but I think about directors who are doing 5 day shoots, like that's pretty lucrative. Um, I think that, when I first started, I definitely had like filmmaker friends who kind of like turned their nose down to commercials because you're kind of like working for the corporate overlords and like adding to, there's definitely like some, moral whatever it's like or principled matters when it comes to advertising, but I do think like they do fund creative projects. At least that's kind of how I want to go into it, knowing like, okay, sure, I did a Walmart commercial, but it's helping to, you know, fund the time that I'm going to take off work to go write or pay for my house or whatever it is.
And you
But
hired a bunch of great actors to be in it, and they got
yeah,
the crew got paid.
everybody
It's
gets
like
paid.
it's.
Exactly.
I feel like these days we all just need to work.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
especially in Canada as filmmakers, it's hard to make money as a filmmaker, period. Just like if you're not making money if you're making movies.
Yeah.
That's the reality. So we need to diversify our markets, I mean, honestly, whether it's TV commercials, branded content, whatever it is, the more fingers you have in a number of different things, the more likely you are to pay your bills and be a creative artist.
Mhm.
Great. Is most of the stuff you guys have done like commercial, like actual, like Jordan, your examples there earlier were, rice cakes and drinks and
Like
stuff.
sparkling water. Yeah.
And I know Deanne, like the CAA Atlantic is roadside assistance and all that stuff. Have you guys done much in like public service space where it's, I don't know, I guess it's a little more meaningful um, work when it comes to, I don't know, any nonprofit type work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like PSAs, as they call them, are one a great way to get in because they're smaller budgets, they're willing to take more chances on new creatives, and also they're more willing to, at least in my experience, they're more willing to kind of play and be collaborative, and it's less, they've gotten a charity who've like, yes, absolutely, please. They don't have money to do commercials, so then they've trusted an agency or creatives to kind of come up with something, and so the client is less hands-on, the client is less kind of demanding. They're just happy to get the work done. So, like did. I mean, I love a PSA because it's kind of like doing a music video. You get to do not whatever you want because we're still trying to, there's still creative to work off of, but it feels less, the stakes aren't as high, so there's more of like an equal relationship that's happening.
Yeah, you don't have to like get your like perfect product shot
Yeah.
perfectly lit and like it's
And then also you get to like I've done a few PSAs, one for like breast cancer awareness, which I did with actually, and that one I did with Aurora Brown. And that was the first time I had met her. And it was because of that relationship, again, comes down to a relationship, that when I went into Baroness, I was like, there's a familiar face. I'm going to connect with that person. So that's, also the ecosystem.
Mhm.
Um, I did a job for Raptors kids, and that was great because I got to go to free Raptors games, so I didn't get paid a lot. I
Amazing.
did get to like meet, I met Jose Calderon, who I loved at the time. So there's always perks, and like, yeah, I think there's also PSAs seem to, they whether they have a spokesperson, like I've seemed to have worked with a lot of like high profile athletes for some reason, but yeah, no,
So
PSAs are great. I'm all for them.
what about the government stuff? Because I don't know, I guess PSA in my mind is also that, which is I wouldn't call it like, ooh, you can do whatever you want, like probably quite the opposite. Have you had anybody do any like federal government or provincial government type work?
I have, I think. I, I mean, yeah, I've definitely pitched some government, like Ontario, or I did Canada Tourism. That was one. I did like that, and that was great. I think like if tourism counts, I guess. Yes,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, it definitely does. I don't think in
Yeah,
my mind I was thinking tourism though. I feel like tourism is probably like the sweet
yeah,
little
that's
spot with government, but then there's all the other like communication type stuff. But
yeah. I did like some. I think it was like a government. It was something with something for girls, like empowering girls or something. And that was like, again, very early start. There's definitely a lot more. I mean, obviously it's government, so there's a lot more bureaucracy. There's a lot more boxes to check. There's a lot more people to have to check in and get approvals from. Definitely, it's a lot of prep. There's a lot of like, a lot of squares on that Zoom when you're in the pre-pro meeting of people I don't know who they are or what they do, but there they are. Um, and they all need to approve it. I would say like those shoot days go a little bit slower too because you've got a video village with like, 15, 20 people there. They all have an opinion. So while a Coke commercial, you're trying to get that bottle perfect, in a government PSA, you're trying to get the messaging so that it's not offensive or like it can't be too funny or it can't be too broad, like it's very nuanced and you have to manage a lot of expectations.
totally. Yeah, I think when we talk about commercial work though, people don't think about that whole side of it where there's opportunities there. It may not be like super creative, but it's work.
Yeah. I think that's the other part of commercials that was a surprise to me as well is like there's the politicking or like it's the same on TV, but doing your song and dance for an agency and the client is equally as important. And like, when you're shooting, you have to go and check in. You can't move on from a shot until you get approvals from Village. And the more you're building your trust with them, the better. I think build again relationships, if that's like the seems to be the common theme, but those relationships that you're keeping with the agency on the shoot day and the client on the shoot day can also lead to other work, repeat business, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, is different than TV. I mean, TV, maybe you have the showrunner on set or a writer who's kind of like, oh, we need this or this. And usually it's story, it's driven, it's like a performance or story thing. And you can be like, okay, I get it. You want them to do it this way or whatever. But there is a lot of different computing going on when you're getting a note from a client or an agency because they're different brains. They don't like S types and N types. If anyone's like a Myers-Briggs fan here, it's like there's intuitive types who are kind of like all of us, kind of creatives, and you think a certain way, and then there's people who get really focused on like like tiny little details that to you you're like, yeah, but that's not okay, that's not gonna matter. But you get those notes a lot where it's like sometimes you get a note where it's like, can she not do that blinking thing with her eyes? And you're like, you want me to go up to Annie Murphy and tell her to stop blinking? Okay, how am I gonna do this? And you have to like really run it through the director computer, supercomputer, and be like, okay, I think what they're bumping on is this. And sometimes you have to just be like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell Annie Murphy not to blink. but like little things, they get stuck on little things. And so there's a lot of you kind of want to be like, why are you worried about this? This is not a big deal. You have to be like, okay, I appreciate this. This is bumping you. Yes, I will do another take. I will turn the bottle half an inch to the left. Totally, no problem. And that's just a bit of, yeah, the song and dance, as Aleysa says it. You got to just be like, okay.
I mean, there's like you are your own creative director at that point. You're your own agency where you have to sell through like, did you love that shot? Wasn't that
Isn't that
take
great? That
fun?
was, I love that take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Are you ready to move on? Let's move on because that was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. We're not going to get better than that. Take
Yeah.
20 seconds is the one. Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Maybe all of you guys can, I don't know, share your most awkward moment during a commercial set, if you have one. I don't know. Is there ever a time when like you need to move on because you know time is time is money, but you know you just can't get consensus on moving on or something like that?
I mean, there's the most common thing I think is when you're on take 35 of the simplest thing and you can tell like there's also the great divide between crew and agency client, and you've got the crew being like you've got this, you've got the clapper, you've got your camera assistant being like take 36 of the same thing, great, here we go.
Yeah.
Like there's and sometimes it's like you've got so many people, they're all looking at different things, they're not necessarily looking at the full picture, they're like, oh wait, that door could be just open just a crack even though the take was great, or
Yeah.
suddenly like they want a red pillow accent color and everything else is useless now that you've shot.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, and those are hard to navigate because sometimes you're like, I know what they want and we aren't getting it, and that's on me to a certain extent, but also or the flip side is like you're trying your darndest and listen, you think that's when you really have to turn on that song and dance and be like,
Yeah.
guys, we got it. And also, this is your money, so if you want to spend it, great, but I think we should move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else with a awkward moment? I felt like that was a really good montage of possible.
I would just say sometimes like because because we work in film and TV, we work with actors a lot. A lot of my dearest friends are actors, and I've heard so many stories about like my actor friends going out for commercial auditions where they just feel like it's like a cattle call and they don't get treated well, and there's just like, you're kind of can be like a sort of faceless prop sometimes on those where they're just like, can they, whatever, like they got to hold it up here and then do this and this, this. Like, I think you have to protect your actors as well. Like even a commercial where they have no line and they just have to like lift up a chip. I think there's like some of those moments where the agency or client gets really hyper focused on something where you're like, okay, I'm gonna put myself between this, make sure the actor's okay. Maybe they're not gonna blink right, but you have to kind of like not buy into that. Like you can't do 30 takes to try to get someone to like move their eyebrow a certain way. At a certain point, you have to just, yeah,
Mm.
move
But
on.
if there's a gummy bear involved and it has to be
Oh,
perfect
the
and they have
gummy
to
bear.
squish it just so, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter how perfect the performance is.
yeah.
Is there a gummy bear story?
There is a gummy bear story. There may or may not be a commercial I did for gummy bears, and in which, again, you're like right about where I get frustrated is where I remind myself this is the client's $1 million or $250,000 or whatever it is, and like, yes, if I was in charge of like protecting that budget, then I'm going to make sure that my product is being sold properly. So there was a gummy bear that had, it had to be, we were on an ice rink. It was cold, so it wasn't squishing as nicely as we wanted it to. So there was like our props person was trying to keep them in a like separate cup and keep them warm. And it was a close up on the gummy bear and he just does a little like squish and it wasn't squishing properly. And they had done a whole history of commercials in which the squish had been established. And I pocketed a gummy bear and just kept it in my hand the entire time to make sure that I had one that was like,
Squishy.
the right temperature. And really, it was either going to make it work or I was going to eat it. And we had done probably like 15 or 16 takes. And then I was just like, try this one. And that's again where you have to be like, you do the song and dance where you're like, "Hey, isn't this fun, client? I'm a team player and like I've had this very special one in my pocket and this is the one I'm convinced." And you like really make magic out of it and it was the one, you did it. And but definitely it was like and that's where like the actors too, you have to protect the actors and the actors, I think actors in commercials know it's a
Yeah.
different muscle, like
Mhm.
they either they do or they don't. I think that it makes it easier for an actor understands what their purpose is on that commercial.
Yeah.
That this guy has to, it's not about his line delivery. He's like trying so desperately to get that
Wishes.
squish properly.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's when you really kind of share in their experience and like look at them in the eye and know that you're both rolling them maybe, but we're gonna get this and let's help each other out.
I would say one other kind of tricky thing, this is sort of a side, this isn't an awkward thing, but one thing that is harder in that I've found a little bit is like the scripts tend to be overwritten and you can't do a 36. I mean, you could do a director's cut that's 36 seconds, but it has to fit into this. So you really have to be on the timing, like your continuity, your script supervisor is like your best friend, be like, that was 12 seconds, it needs to be 10 seconds. And you have to like really be on that because otherwise, yeah, you can't cut these things together properly if it's 10 seconds too long. And so that's a real challenge because sometimes you have to cut a line of dialogue and you have to be on it and giving these suggestions of like you can't just shoot the I mean the last thing I did I was like I know this script is too long. I know one of these scenes is going to get cut and it did eventually, but we still shot the whole thing. We could have saved a lot of money if we just cut one of them before, but they wanted it all in there and you go, okay, it's your money.
And you find that especially with sixes and 15s, which seems like there's more and more of that
Yeah,
because
there's no
the
time.
day of broadcast commercials is kind of slowing down. So again, if it goes back to can you tell a story in 15 seconds? That's gives you a lot of confidence in somebody if they can.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I know when we're making something and somebody says, "Oh, it's going online. It doesn't have to be like because I think we call the 15s we call them 15s because that's like the ideal length, but it can actually be 18 seconds if it has to be. So when you know that, it's like okay, whew, even knowing that is a little bit of a reprieve.
But like I've had scripts that I've gotten that because I used to be a script supervisor that I got and I was like, this is not 45 seconds or 30 seconds. And I timed them. I read them out, I time them myself. And if you can have those conversations early on, because they'll trust you if you're like, guys, this is not going to happen. We got to trim this down, or what do you want to do about this? You need to be on it. You can't just sort of blindly like walk into it when you know you got too much footage.
Sometimes it helps you get the job too if you're talking about
Yeah.
that at the treatment stage, because then they know that you've like thought it out, you're timing it
Yeah.
out. You also have suggestions on what can be cut or how it can be simplified. And sometimes they're open to that, and sometimes, again, you have to have the understanding that like this script may or may not have gone through testing 1,000 times. Like that line of dialogue has been like rewritten a million times. They probably already thought of your idea, but it just didn't get past client or testing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Guys, Vic tells us we only had a couple minutes left, but I don't know. Is there anything I was gonna say? Maybe our last question could be like, I don't know, what's the most fun thing that you've made in the commercial world, or but before we do that, is there anything else maybe that um, we should talk about, or anything else that comes to mind that you want to share?
I mean, I think what we were talking about in our initial conversation is just even about reels in general,
Mm.
and that um, maybe in the commercial industry, I think especially there's a lot of short attention spans and busy schedules. So a 4 minute reel is maybe less like it can sometimes be less effective than just short snippets. Like, well, I mean, we were all laughing because like I don't have a reel. I don't, or if I did, like I can't remember the last time a reel was useful. But when I first started, I had a website that was just like clips from Baroness or a funny scene from a show or something, and that seemed to be more engaging because somebody could just like click, move on. Um, so I think for those who are kind of looking at their body of work and how to get it in front of somebody, then maybe Maybe it's something web-based, or maybe, or it's a quick 1 minute something or other if you're a
Mhm.
visual
Yeah,
director. Again, it's kind of also tailor your reel to what kind of work you want to do, what box you're going to end up inevitably being put in.
yeah.
Yeah, and one of you guys said too about like only put the good stuff in there. Just because you did something doesn't mean you should include it. It doesn't all have to be like super polished necessarily, but as long as it shows the kind of work you want to do.
Yeah, and if you're doing a short something or other, I mean, something that my EP from when I first started is like, at the end of the day, it's the idea that wins. It could be the simplest concept, and if it's a great idea, if it's a simple concept executed like well, that'll get noticed. I mean, it goes well for everything, I guess, but especially commercials. If you're trying to think of something, it doesn't need to be a massive,
Mhm.
high concept something or other. Just be
Yeah.
a cute little punchline.
Could be one shot. Yeah.
Mhm.
So anybody got a funny story to tell? I mean, half of this conversation has been pretty funny, but is there anything, I guess, was there a really fun thing that you did a weird thing for that we want to end on? Anything?
The last commercial I did, or sorry, the second last commercial I did, which was the I keep calling it season 2 of Crispy Minis, but the second Crispy Minis commercial was very fun. It was Annie Murphy goes to space, basically. And so there was a bunch of anti-gravity stuff. There's like her as an astronaut, like floating in the universe, and her in a kind of like in like a NASA anti-gravity chamber. And then her strapped into one of those like I always think of like Thomas Amusement's gyrosphere thing, which is literally what we had, and we just painted it blue. Um, so that was a really fun commercial. It was a great script, and Annie obviously killed it. And but the gyrosphere was a real the anti-gravity stuff was easy. That was just like, wire work and great VFX. But the gyroscope, we strapped her into that thing and then, locked the camera on. It's basically in like a kind of medium shot, and then we would just spin her, and she had to keep going, and gluten free. And we probably shot like I don't know, a lot of and gluten free. She probably said it like 40 times. And at a certain point, be like, Annie, are you okay? Are you gonna barf? She's like, no, do it again. And in the commercial, it's there for as long as and gluten free. Like it's a 2-second clip, but we were flipping her around for probably an hour and a half. Yeah.
That's fun.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Like I worked with like non-actors, so I haven't, it's a different kind of thing that Jordan and Aleysa have done. So I don't know. I mean, we had a lot of laughs, didn't we? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I don't think we want to talk about them on the panel, but we had a lot of laughs behind the camera. I don't know.
yeah, we did. It's funny because I feel like we could have a whole other hour talking about just the challenges in a small market here where there's not a ton of actors sometimes that are like fit the part. And so you are dealing with amateur actors, and directing amateur actors is a completely different ballgame when, I can imagine for all of you. So that's a whole thing.
Definitely, definitely. I mean,
Hmm.
there's also a whole. I mean, it's a whole thing because there's like also like an actor lockout that this has been happening
Yeah.
here, and so really, there's like more and more commercials were being done. I think there's some. I haven't been tracking it. I probably should, but like a lot. Like for a while, it was only non-union. There was like a handful of agencies that were signatory to ACTRA, so that became challenging because you're doing exclusively non-union and non-actors, and if you can pull performances that, I mean, I feel like I'm up for the challenge. Of course, I have a lot of actors for friends, so I kind of, and could afford to. I was like, I'm only going to do non-union commercials. The Gummy Bear was not. It was a different situation, but I only wanted to do union commercials because I really wanted to support the actors. Um, and I can't remember. I got sidetracked, but anyways, it is hard. But yeah. So that said, working with non-union actors, if you can pull performances out of that, I think that's your ultimate test as a director. Can you pull something emotional, especially out of somebody who's never done it before?
Hmm.
Awesome, guys. So this was a like awesome. I knew this hour was going to just fly by.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is sort of like the very first thing we've done, and like just starting the conversation around, how do we help people break into commercial work or get some opportunities that maybe they are not accessible or they just don't know about. Yeah, so, but I think, moving forward, film festival, we may, maybe think about doing an event for like networking with agencies or just have some sort of a knowledge sharing thing with different producers where we can talk about like maybe the best way to share your work, whether that is a reel, like helping people put together a little short reel, like definitely not a 4 minute one, but something short where you can just have those little moments of your work if you don't have actual commercials or yeah, I just want to thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, though. I mean, it's also exciting that this is even happening, especially in the East Coast. I think, like, it is such a community out there, and feels like it feels practically achievable to get yourself out there and get yourself known.